Titans and guests to UW Oshkosh. Welcome to this evening's event. My name is Brooke Mullen, and I'm a freshman studying political science. I also work with the Tommy G. Thompson Center as a Bridging the Divide campus representative. Thank you for coming tonight. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership. A very big thank you to our director, Alex Talk, and Associate Director, Ruth Brash. Tonight is also hosted by the UWO Student Veterans Association, College Democrats, and College Republicans. We would like to thank all of the faculty who strongly encourage students to be here tonight. Thank you to everyone for supporting this event. A special thanks to two students who handled the lion's share of this event's coordination. Without them, tonight would not have been possible. Thank you to Jess Duke, Center for Civic and Community Engagement intern, and Sadie Remenga, SVA event coordinator, for all of their work in coordinating this event. As I said, tonight's event is sponsored by the Thompson Center, and to say a few remarks about their work is Dr. Alexander Talk, director of the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership and an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Thank you, and thank you, Brooke, and thank you so much for your work on the Bridging the Divide. We're really happy to have you as our campus representative. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm really excited about this event, and we're really delighted to be able to sponsor tonight's event, to work with UW Oshkosh here, to work with Mike Luther. Thank you for your work. Want to thank all the sponsors of tonight's event, the UW Oshkosh Student Veterans Association, and especially the UW Oshkosh College Democrats and College Republicans. I think it's just a great sign of having both parties here sponsoring this, a sign of what we want, which is that having this be an environment where everybody can succeed, where everybody from every viewpoint can succeed, is really good for the campus and good for all of us, even if it's not, even when it's people who don't share your own views. We received a few complaints about this event, none from UW Oshkosh, but a few from another UW campus I won't mention. So it's great to see a sort of different attitude towards what we're doing here and what we're talking about here tonight. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Thompson Center, let me just say a few brief words about it. The Thompson Center was founded to follow in the footsteps of Governor Tommy G. Thompson, who proudly worked with colleagues from both sides of the aisle to advance the public good. To carry on Governor Thompson's legacy, the Thompson Center seeks to inform and inspire current and future public leaders and promote leadership skills and effective public leadership. We work to further these goals by sponsoring events such as this, programs such as Bridging the Divide, and I hope you all check that out and even talk to Brooke about it later. We sponsor a Distinguished Public Leadership Award and conduct other activities across all the UW campuses. All of our events are free and open to the public. We live stream as many of them as we can, which is almost all of them. And thank you to those who are joining us by live stream as well as in person. So for more information about our events and about the center, please check out our website. And now I'm pleased to hand the microphone back to Brooke to introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you.
According to Catherine Schaefer at the Pew Research Center in 2023, 79% of Americans had negative attitudes about the American political system. The top words they used were divisive, dysfunctional, disgusting, and even dumpster fire. Tonight, I want to introduce our speaker, who will touch on how he learned to foster meaningful political conversations, regardless of the atmosphere or differing ideologies. As a Navy veteran, he spent 6 years serving and saw the world on 3 deployments. He later attended Lawrence University, where he majored in English language and literature and wrote for the school newspaper, The Laration, and got an internship with the National Journalism Center and the National Review. He later worked as an associate editor at the American Spectator. He went on to the National Review as a William Buckley Fellow, became a contributor, and now is the Nights and Weekends editor at the National Review. Tonight, he is here to share his story called How to Succeed as a Conservative on a Liberal Campus. Everyone, please join me in welcoming to the stage Luther Ray Abel.
Thank you. Good on mic. Everyone hear me? Good. Awesome. All right. Thank you for being here. It's a beautiful Wisconsin day, and you're inside listening about politics, which must mean that your professors forced you to be here with extra credit or something similar. I have certainly been there. Nonetheless, I appreciate the effort to attend, and for the public, thanks for coming in. Thanks for checking me out. Thanks for checking out the Tommy G. Thompson Center. My gratitude to them. Louder. There we go. How's that? All right. Thank you to the Tommy G. Thompson Center, College Democrats and Republicans, and the UWO's student veterans for sponsoring the event. That's awesome. A group of people can come together, bring me on. I'm sure you'll improve in the future as far as who you pick, but very grateful. So a bit of a disclaimer for the data heads before I begin. I will make some generalizations here. So if you want to talk stats, data, research, I'm happy to email about this, but there's nothing more insufferable than having a guy recite numbers to you for half an hour. So I won't be that guy, and I won't do that to you or to me. Dale Carnegie offers 6 ways to make people like you. That's because they grow resentful at 7. And when it gets to double digits, it's mob violence. So having learned that lesson already in my life, we won't do that here. About me, my name is Luther Abel. I'm the Nights and Weekends editor at National Review, as was mentioned earlier. Having been an intern, later a fellow in that magazine that was initially published in 1955, founded by one William F. Buckley. His most famous debate was probably over in England, but you may have had that for a political science class that you're somewhat familiar with his name. But before that, before I was anybody, if I am one now, I grew up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, attended a private Christian school there, and then enlisted in the Navy. After it became apparent that I wasn't yet ready for college, I didn't want to carry debt, and while my scores were okay, not doing your homework results in a 2.9 GPA. So no one was willing to pay me to go to their college. Let's put it that way. So the Navy. Navy's all right, boats. I like boats. I grew up around boats. And during my time there, I started as a nuclear engineer. Do not send English majors to nuclear engineering. That's a note for the Navy that they learned. So I went conventional engineering aboard probably the shadiest frigate in the whole fleet. And I was the guy on the very bottom of the pecking order there. So I was an oil wiping guy who had a 97 out of a 99 ASVAB score. And I had no idea what I'd got myself into. I was in it for 6 years. So get comfortable, I guess. And I did. Went on one deployment there, decommissioned the ship, went to Portsmouth, Virginia, learned cryogenics on this defunct base. And they told us we were there because in case we blew ourselves up, we wouldn't blow up anyone else. So if you're ever making oxygen, remember, it is an accelerant. So be careful. Afterward, USS Carl Vinson, San Diego, did a pair of deployments. Oxygen, nitrogen, ship security, intermediary aviation calibration. That was fun. Chief comes in one day and says, hey, you're going to go work with aircraft now. Okay. And safety programs. If any of you were around in 2017, we were the aircraft carrier that went missing for a while. It was a big thing for the Trump administration where they were answering like, where is this aircraft carrier? Well, we were steaming north towards North Korea, having been around Australia. And so it was sort of an odd sensation to see on a CNN Chiron worry about us. The Carl Vinson is missing. Our command hadn't told us we were missing, but apparently we were. So we did a wellness check on North Korea. Everything kind of smoothed out. It was cool. And that was about it for me. I left the Navy in 2018, attended Lawrence University in Appleton, mostly because it offered an opportunity to test my beliefs that I had sort of developed in the Navy. I wanted a liberal, a progressive school to see what I was made of and if my beliefs would stand up to any level of examination at all. Politically, in high school, I fluctuated from a fan of Obama in 2008, as much out of contradiction to those who disliked him as any real attraction to him, and then later became that horrible senior who posts boomer grade political memes on his Facebook page and is way too interested in politics for how little he knows about them. Which I think many of us have been there at one point or the other. So if you get through it, that's the important bit. Once a sailor, I couldn't run my mouth about politics, my commander-in-chief. So the long watches provided opportunities to read. There I consumed junk food tier political fare like Howard Zinn and Rush Limbaugh, as well as reading through the great books. So your Machiavelli, your Melville, your Huxleys. I wanted to know, and I was also jealous of all my friends who were in English classes while I was stuck in the middle of the Pacific. So, well, I'll just make my own college curriculum since I can't attend college at the moment. In San Diego, my evenings were spent at the library with a stack of the New Republic, National Review, The Atlantic, The Economist, and maybe even the Jacobin for flavor every once in a while. And it was there I found my politics, the politics of those cooler-headed conservatives who understood human nature better than, in my view, their liberal and progressive counterparts, who I found tended to blame structures first and people second. And to me, it seemed that we are fundamentally broken creatures, selfish creatures. And so everything we make has error in it. So how can we control for our own failings? This concept is best captured in Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But if you're a more secular sort of fellow, in the political philosophy of Thomas Hobbes, wherein the thinker favors the existence of any form of government so long as it prevents the war of all against all, that is the human condition. Why am I conservative? Because I don't think people are all that great on their own. And so we need to develop institutions and traditions to prevent our worst excesses while providing a space for us to create together. Having worked alongside thousands of others in trying conditions, it was obvious to me that the Apostle Paul and Hobbes, not an apostle, still a cool guy, had it right. We are selfish creatures, and how we treat each other is largely dependent on fashioning society that allows a man to pursue his interest while simultaneously improving the lives of others. This is not to say that all we do is selfish or base, but it is our instinct, and we should account for it. Conservatism, to me, at its root, is gratitude. It's saying, thank goodness those before me figured out most of this, and it's up to me to just sort of maintain it and maybe do some renovation from time to time. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'd just like to define our terms so we know what we're talking about when we discuss with one another, because each of these three, liberal, conservative, and progressive, can mean quite a bit to quite a few people. So when I say a conservative, I mean in the American conservative tradition, popularized by men like William F. Buckley and his peers in the 50s, called fusionism, this holy alliance, or an unholy one, depending on who you ask, between free market economics, sort of traditional moral values, and a muscular foreign policy. Last was as much a product of its time, looking across the Bering Strait at communist Russia, as it was an originalist view of federal power, being primarily focused on the defense, on the public defense, with all other matters left to the most local political structures possible, sometimes called localism. Edmund Burke expressed this sentiment while writing critically of the French Revolution: to be attached to the subdivision, to love the little platoon we belong to in society is the first principle, the germ, as it were, of affections. It is the first link in the series by which we proceed toward a love of our country and to mankind. The idea here being, if you don't love the people around you, it's very difficult to love the country that you all are a part of. So we should develop our relationships with one another in the local space. The conservative views the government's role as clearing a safe space, a fen, of organic social organizations, be they churches, VFW, union halls, Elks Lodges, free clinics. It's what we do together that the government is not commissioning, these sorts of things. When I talk about a liberal, I'll try to stay consistent here and mean only the Lockean understanding, which is the idea that expression, speech, press, and all other forms of communication and conviction are to be allowed as best as we can. As Locke wrote in his second treatise, the state of nature has a law of nature to govern it, which obliges everyone, and reason, which is that law, teaches all mankind, which will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions, for men being all the workmanship of one omnipotent. Now, the American conceit of liberal, you might recognize it most at Thanksgiving when some uncle pronounces it liberal, L-I-B-R-U-H-L, in a dismissive sort of way. That is not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about liberals. And in fairness to liberalism, it's something that the populist right is also opposed to, shared by some of the most vocal Democrats. So when I'm saying Democrats, I don't mean liberals. When I'm saying liberals, I don't mean Democrats or progressives. Finally, the progressive will function as shorthand for the bulk of modern Democrats, especially the millennial and Gen Z cohorts, the sort of activist base of the party. Much like their 20th century counterparts, such as Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, your Woodrow Wilsons. Broad strokes here, specific policy definitely changed. Modern progressives are interested in a lot of raw political power, extra constitutional reform. For instance, packing the Supreme Court has come up as a serious item in the pages of the Atlantic, New York Times, places, publishing progressive thought, and have little patience for debate outside of a combination of perceived need for self-defense, this democracy dies in darkness idea, and curbing the power of special interest groups. So this would be lobbyists, corporations, private right-wing individuals. I'm sure you can imagine one or two names. A progressive is instinctively inclined to see all that is wrong with the world, the hungers, the injustices, so forth, and wish to overcome these with top-down sort of fixes. It's an understandable instinct, commendable outside of policy, I would say, but it's an understandable instinct to be sure. To quote Wilson, I think he captures this pretty well when talking about universal liberation in an address to naturalized citizens in 1915, my urgent advice to you would be not only always think first of America, but always also to think first of humanity. This idea that we have some charge to improve the conditions of others. You do not love humanity if you seek to divide humanity into jealous camps. Humanity can be welded together only by love, by sympathy, by justice, not by jealousy or hatred. I am sorry for the man who seeks to make personal capital out of passions of his fellow men. This would be the capitalists of his period he's described. He has lost the touch and ideal of America, for America was created to unite mankind by those passions which lift and not by the passions which separate and debase. So these are the groups I'm talking about and we'll discuss now. With the table set, I'm here today to talk about surviving as a conservative on generally liberal to progressive campuses. A topic I hope will benefit all attendees, whether your political priors are left, right, center, or just kind of agnostic. You're tired of the whole thing. For conservatives in the crowd, may this be helpful and reassuring. You're not alone, but there is some things you need to do. For those on the left, I'm really glad you're here. May this be illuminating for you. Many of the suggestions I'll offer are apolitical in nature and can make your university experience even better. So let's get to it. When a young conservative arrives on a college campus, a few things become almost immediately evident. Somewhere between the diversity workshops, claiming structural racism, welcome week, hate speech policy lectures, and your first day in the classroom requiring introductions by name and gender identity, it may feel like the entire structure of the university is bent against everything you grew up with. And in a way, it is. That sounds worse out loud, but bear with me. As with any institution, there are expected mores and methods to conduct oneself on the grounds of your school of choice. Rarely, with the exception of Liberty, Hillsdale, a few others, do schools of higher learning actively support being your sort of stereotypical, God-fearing, small government admiring Buckleyite. All 12 of us. As much as we conservatives may gnash our teeth about this being the way of things, calling for higher ed to come crashing down, for instance, I'm sure you see people run at the mouth all the time about this on Twitter. Just get rid of universities as a whole. They're corrupt, they're no good. Young people are incentivized to attend university. It's just a fact. And some of the best schools are steeped in progressive politics, Harvard being especially apt recent example. Grumbling about it won't change anything in the short term, and pretending otherwise is selfish. It's in a young person's best interest to attend the best school he can afford, and I'd prefer to see conservative academics, attorneys, and doctors trained at the best schools, regardless of politics. Surrendering formal education on the right is unacceptable. But on an individual basis, that doesn't make anything easier for those who seek to attend these schools. You're up against it. It's unpleasant at times. Observing the realities of the university when it comes to sex, race, and politics, a young conservative man or woman has three choices to make. You can make: bend the knee, be silent, or speak up in some capacity. Each is more difficult to do than the last. The young conservative may capitulate and go along with the flow. Happens all the time. And I don't blame them most of the time. It's tough. Eventually, embracing left-wing thinking. Indeed, this is the fear of many parents and relatives when their baby goes to college. He leaves with a copy of the NIV and returns lauding the materialism of Marx. It's a cliche, but it happens often enough to be a valid fear for those who care about the college-bound man or woman. Another option for the young conservative, of course, especially one who wishes to retain friendships while not casting aside what he feels to be right, is to say nothing at all. Should just shut up the second anything contentious happens and nod along. Yeah, oh, that's crazy. And then hope that the conversation steers elsewhere. You can probably survive quite a long time with that. But unfortunately, this sort of monastic action is challenging to maintain because of the progressive mantra that silence is violence, or some variation of that. The idea that you must actively support by voice, action, social media, progressive action agendas, or else it's construed that you disagree with them on matters that are perceived as life or death. That usually does not prolong a friendship. So your mileage may vary. In the capitulatory and quiet conservatives' defense, when the social aspect of college is omnipresent, living in close proximity with others, tight peer groups, and little outside exposure, there's every incentive imaginable to be agreeable. I'm not condemning anyone here. For those who speak up, there are various costs. You are unlikely to have many friends. You will have some papers come back that are graded more harshly than your peers' work. Not always. That's probably the exception, actually, but it'll happen. And you have to wrestle with the temptation to set aside good manners, opting for causticity in their stead. After all, you're the aggrieved party. Why not respond in kind? Most outspoken young conservatives have been the latter at some point, myself included, the caustic sort. It's a stage for some and permanent for others. Sporting a Facts Don't Care About Your Feelings t-shirt from the Daily Wire with an unread copy of Hayek's Road to Serfdom under one's arm and drinking from the ever-flowing font that is the Daily Wire's leftist tears hot or cold tumbler, we strut into class to bicker with the professor or that magnificently coiffed individual with chromatic hair for the umpteenth time. It's easy to call to mind the Ben Shapiro thug life moments. There's probably a more recent example of this, with Shapiro rhetorically dunking on gawping undergrads and desire to recreate these scenes in class and around campus. Just for the thrill of it, the catharsis. And this is especially true if a professor just served you a helping in class and you found yourself at loss for words in a way to respond. Of course, that never happened to me. But remember that Shapiro and others, I think his superior, are relatively well-read individuals who've been doing this for 20 plus years at this point. You're not that guy. I'm not that guy. To be like that guy takes more than echoing quips. It requires perseverance, compassion, and robust intellectual foundations. Hopefully, we'll get past Shapiro's level and become a Jay Nordlinger, Thomas Sowell, or Rick Brookhiser. These are guys who've sat down and read through the entire New York Times for 50 years. They know their stuff. They know the world. They are students always. The purpose is not to do the dunking, but to offer better solutions. And that takes years of daily information consumption and contemplation. So, speaking to myself as much to you, be humble and come correct. And if you're caught lacking, accept it, and then come back next time, more ready than you were before. Easy way to test if you're leaning into trolling is to observe the other students when you raise your hand in class. If every other person in the room rolls his or her eyes or looks exasperated, and you raise your hand, you're laying it on too thick. Roll it back. Without knowing it, you've become the left stereotype of a conservative, unempathetic, needlessly contrarian, and pig-headed. Luther, you may be thinking, you cannot conceive of all the left-wing nonsense my peers and professors push in class. How can I not say something? Well, because two people making fools of themselves just makes them look like fools to everyone else. And your purpose, if you are going to be getting into a serious debate, is to win the third-party observer, if there is one who isn't just staring at his laptop, not actually paying attention in class, but you're trying to win him to your side. I've been there in classes when students offered communist revolution as the answer to racial or sex inequality. I've sat and listened as a professor claimed that FDR's policies single-handedly reversed the Great Depression and all foot fungus, and have stared at the ceiling as the supposedly unique evils of America's founding are enumerated by the speaker without care for historical contextualization. Are those people wrong or misrepresenting the truth? I think so. Is it frustrating? Yes. But deal with it gently. Merely suggesting there may be an alternative view is often enough to win at least part of the class to your side. You don't have to have the answer for why the Great Depression ended. You merely need to say, well, actually, it was trending upward before many of those policies were already enacted, the Great Deal, and it probably arrested some of that upward progress. And I'm like, oh, interesting. There's something else here. And those unwilling to speak up, as you did, may seek you out after class to thank you for doing so. I made more than one friend this way, and one arch nemesis, which was fun, in the student newspaper. Student conservatives can fall into the same victim mentality as some do on the left. We pity ourselves because we see ourselves as outnumbered and unwanted. Because of this perceived victimhood, we can feel vindicated in obnoxious behavior. I'm begging you to set aside that mentality, as tempting as it is. Most students in your classes, while tossing out vague progressive talking points, have not decided where they fall politically whatsoever. They're going along to get along. The best thing you can do to win them to your side is to act graciously. Much as when evangelizing or doing sales, I guess, we win more arguments by being charitable than we do by rhetoric. Most people aren't listening to what you're saying. They're listening to how you say it. So keep that in mind. From my anecdotal experience and those of others near me, the dirty secret about college bias is that 5% of the student body and 10% of faculty make up the activist class. No one else really cares that much. Most professors are just really nerdy about their specific discipline. If they're voting, they're just voting for many of the same reasons that anyone else does. There isn't deep thought put into it. The rest of the college students and professors are just, as I said, going along to get along, fearing being called out by the activist set. So while it feels like the world is pressing in around you, it's not. But there are a few ways to maintain relationships, acquit oneself respectably, and achieve better discourse without being seen as an irredeemable jackwagon. Nothing anyone wants to be. Perhaps the best way to have your views considered by ostensible opponents is to take their proposals and mentally dissect them for underlying motivation. For example, you're in class and another student says we should raise the minimum wage to $23.23. He's a part-time economist, part-time Michael Jordan appreciator. The temptation is to scoff and rattle off AEI statistics about what such a proposal would do to small businesses, inflation, etc. We're not really talking about that. We wouldn't be incorrect, but we'd be missing the deeper question our peers looking to answer. How do we elevate those on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum? There are people starving. There are people without many things that we take for granted. How can we incorporate them into society? That's something that we all want. Let's figure it out. Let's do it. Because this question is what is most likely motivating the other student's admittedly half-baked proposal. Thinks it'll fix it. That's awesome. We need to look at that a little closer, but we're at least along the path to discussion here. A better answer would be to acknowledge that the other party wishes of what the other party wishes to accomplish. We might say, yeah, I want to see the same thing, man. Well, X's motivation is commendable. There may be less economically damaging ways to accomplish that very goal. One can then list free market strategies to reduce poverty, capitalism being that great anti-poverty mechanism that we've observed over the last 100 or so years. Yes, imperfect, but incredible for those on the lowest end worldwide. Well, no way diminishing the laudable concerns of the other student. Be kind, do your homework, and know when is a good time to speak up. You don't have to have a comment on everything, but get in there when you can. You cannot fix an entire university, but you can be a pleasant representative of conservative thought in the classes you do attend. For parents and students looking at colleges, you have to be frank with your kid. There are a lot of places where academically, kid might fit really well, but the culture just isn't there. Especially the more immature he is, in whatever way he might be immature. At 18, I was many ways immature. The intellectual and theological maturity of the student must be considered foremost, far more than an essentially arbitrary ranking, as we've observed with these most recent changes to U.S. News reports. For those conservative students already at left-wing institutions, as I was, try to get an economics or political philosophy class every term, every semester. I found these departments are typically more ideologically diverse and much more welcoming to conservative, libertarian sort of students. So if you can, balance your fare. If you're dealing with a lot of the humanities, definitely get you an economics class. Find you a Marty Rothbard type down there. These classes can act as a respite from your otherwise progressive class schedule, and there's a high probability that you'll find like-minded peers, potential friends in these departments. Together, these steps can help make your campus years a joy. However, there is a counterpoint. There comes a moment when an exhortation to grin and bear it from the stage to a young person who's really struggling, doesn't have friends, who's been shut down in class, who's known as that jerk on campus, or is just excluded, alienated, asks more from a young man or woman than one should be expected to provide. For anyone listening who's feeling pretty well beaten down because of campus politics or a professor's harassment or something that feels like it is an affront that isn't attached to your academics, you have options outside of yourself. Something I witnessed at Lawrence. I had a young friend when I was, holy smokes. When I was a senior, he came on as a freshman, and from the very beginning, it was obvious it just didn't work. He had to go through the sort of indoctrination stuff, the Welcome Week initiation, which has a lot of social programming in it, and it just didn't comport with where he was coming from. He was a conservative guy, grew up in a pretty sheltered place. He gave it his best. He got on the Common Council, but it was obvious it didn't work out for him. So he left. And you can do that. That's the amazing thing. There's like 1 million colleges, and they all want you. They'll probably even give you money, because right now enrollment is hurting pretty much across the board. For the older commuting student, I didn't really understand this until my senior year, because I got to go home. My social life was not dependent on the people around me. I ended at 4:20, blaze up, and then I was out. So I didn't have to play along to get along, to have people to hang out with from 4 p.m. to midnight. For everyone else, that's a serious consideration, because it can be a long 4 years by yourself. So you can go. But know this, universities are bettered by a smattering of conservative students, out and out conservative students, whose attendance there provides them, both the students and the others, with a formative education, a rigorous education, with skeptical feedback for you that left-wing students may experience more rarely, having many of the same priors as the professors from which they learn. I had a professor, history professor, Atlantic World class, where she gave me a B- on a paper. I'm like, wow, she just hates me because of everything I believe. So I got with her one day after class, and I was like, what's the deal? And she's like, no, it's pretty bad. So there are moments where what the student perceives as a slight can actually just be some bad writing. And she pointed to some factual errors in my writing that have made me a much more careful writer since. So as I offer this next suggestion of possibly going to the press if something is really bad, I want you to consider localism and how you resolve conflict on campus. But first, resilience is an ability to be cultivated. Yet I do fear that that burden is too much for some and can lead to defeatism or reactionary impulses, which pushes young conservatives to the worst parts of the right And it's something that I hate seeing pretty much as losing one to the far left, because to me, they're kissing cousins, the far left, far right. Horseshoe theory, word up. So the student may say, after all, if the left is openly abusing institutional power for their ends against me, why shouldn't we? Organizations like Turning Point USA make much of their ground with such lines of thinking, much to the dismay of responsible parties on the right. The solution may well be what Buckley described years ago. Preliminary to endowing such future leaders of this country, we have some obligation to speculate as to the direction in which they will lead us. In other words, don't give your money to schools with which you disagree, especially endowment money. Do your time, get the degree that sets you up for lifelong success, and then use your earnings to support causes or schools that you agree with more. You can do that. There's some days where you just need to keep it pushing. For the college applicant, ask yourself whether a progressive school offers enough to make it worth the challenge. It's not all bad, but you will be tested, and there will be classes where you will not want to speak. You can transfer, and you can go to the dean. If there's a professor who's just messing with you, meet with him. If it's not working out, go to the dean. After that, contact me, contact someone like me, the College Fix, Campus Reform. If you're more on the left, New Republic. And if it's a legal issue, there are two organizations. I suggest FIRE, which is the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, and the ACLU. Both are quite good at what they do. I would suggest FIRE if you're coming from more of a conservative viewpoint, but try both. Even if they cannot help you, they will often suggest ways to make life easier for yourself. The real idea here is don't take fights alone if you don't have to. There are people whose job it is to lobby on behalf of college students who have heterodox views or just having a tough time with a professor who's brutalizing them. Like it's there. If any of you have played Helldivers 2 recently, brand new game out, it's awesome. Call in your artillery as often as possible. It's there, it's available. It's much easier operating with artillery. Always use your resources. But most of all, join student groups and don't let partisanship ruin your time at school, if at all possible. Take part in things bigger than yourself. There are 1,000 student organizations around. They all need people. They all need people to actually show up to the meetings. Get in on that. Politics are just one part of life. You can be in an environmental group and it doesn't do much about politics at all. You're just growing vegetables together and doing some gardening. That's awesome. There's far more happening, much of it more impactful, improving your life and those of others around you than whatever exists on Twitter or Blue Sky or what have you. Candidates rise and fall. Every election is touted as the last gasp of democracy. It's not. And yet here we are, a peculiar but functioning system that's been going for 2.5 centuries. It's amazing. A candidate has a small chance of changing your life for the better, but missing your chemistry final or your girlfriend's soccer match to knock on doors is guaranteed to change things for the worse. I'll leave you with these words from Clive Staples Lewis. You may know him as an English professor at Cambridge or something of a writer. In an excerpt that comes from the essay titled On Living in an Atomic Age, which is especially apt for our moment here as war seems to be cropping up on all fronts. If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things, praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep, and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds. Do not let politics dominate your minds. You will be worse for it. I promise you, having been a guy who's had politics dominate his mind once or twice. Be aware of politics. Be a citizen. Know what you believe, and then go take part in life. Thank you. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Luther. We have time for a Q&A, and then we'll be doing a networking reception. So I'll tell you about that before we start that. But if anybody has any questions, we just want to ask them into the microphone so our friends online can also hear the questions well. So we have time. Who's got a question for Luther?
Hey, Luther, I guess I didn't get a strong sense from you about students versus faculty. And to the extent that as a conservative, you or others may have felt uncomfortable, put upon, whatever, how did the faculty handle things? Were they much more neutral? Did they try to defend both sides? Were they just caught up in liberal arguments or just what?
Thank you for the question. Dick Niemi, University of Rochester. Depends on the class, of course. Most professors were more than willing to engage with conservative ideas, especially conservative ideas that did not come prepackaged that way. For me, I made every effort to make sure that my arguments were reasonable outside of any partisan bearing. Now, something that I found amusing in class, this sort of separation between the student body and the professorate. There was a moment in a history class with a very left-wing professor. He and I got into it all the time. We had a blast together. But there had been a contentious moment in a previous class, specifically about transgenderism in, it must have been film history. And at the next class, a student raised the point, could we have a safe space when discussing these things? To her, meaning, could we not discuss this at all? And the professor, not knowing this, said, of course we can have a safe space, which to him, being the more classically liberal guy, meant this dispute does not go outside of class. And so there was this separation between what is allowed and what isn't. And so the bubble was viewed very differently, even in the definition of a safe space, whether it's safe for debate or it's safe for one's priors. And so outside of the one professor who docked my grade, and I was pretty hurt by that until I found out that I just wasn't writing very well, which was doubly hurtful. I did not experience it as much because I had already made many of the pratfalls that a young conservative might. So I was cognizant more than I think the average 18, 19-year-old would have been, because I was 26. If I'm saying what a 19-year-old says at 26, you probably need to ship me out somewhere. That's no good. Does that answer your question? More or less? And there were some professors who were insufferable outside of class, just naked partisan politics, taking students to polls, which I thought was beyond the pale. I thought that was ugly, seeing professors walk students over to the polls. But I wasn't threatened by it because it was just partisan politics. She wasn't a deep thinker about politics. It was her team. And it didn't come into the classroom in a way that kept me from getting an education. With her, I read Clarissa, the longest novel in the English language, and it was a magnificent class. So making that separation between a professor's oddity outside of class and in class, one has to make those concessions, I guess. Next question.
Yeah, next question. Over here.
As a fellow English major and conservative, I just was curious as to what introduced you to English as a field, like to work in, like what inspired you, I guess.
Yeah, so my first does this work? My first summer out of the Navy in school, I worked as an HVAC tech because that's what I knew from the Navy. And the next summer, I was going to start my own business and do the same. But then I was like, man, that's like a lot of work, and my knees get sore, and I just want to be in the air conditioning for once. So I'd written some clips for the school newspaper at that point because I wanted to see a conservative voice in print. There wasn't one. We had two Marxists, which were cool guys, but thought we needed someone on the right. So I sent those clips off to every conservative outlet I could think of. I just cold called, cold emailed. Here's my stuff. Check me out. I'm this dude in Wisconsin. What do you think? And National Review liked my clips. They saw a voice there. And if you are English dude, that's what's up. Developing your voice and leaning into it as much as your editors will allow. And then get published in as many easy places to do so, like the school newspaper, because more than your resume, it's all clips going forward. So yeah, I was an intern one summer. I went out to Portland, covered the riots there in, must have been 2020. They liked me so much, they brought me back the next summer at National Review. And then when I graduated, they said, how about a Buckley Fellowship? And I was there for a year. That pays $60,000 working remotely. So if you want to get paid to write, there are places on the right. It's actually much easier on the right. And some lefty journalists remind us of this, but you just need reps. So get in there, write as much as you can, get published, and then send everything out as often as you can. Because we can use as many young conservative thinkers and writers who aren't idiots. There are so many idiots. So yeah, don't be a jerk and write a lot, and you'll be good to go.
Next question.
Hi. So when I heard you were coming to campus, I had never heard of you before. So I had Googled you
Many people.
yes,
heard of
and something that came up was your X account. And I just had a question about a tweet that you had, not trying to judge or anything. I just would like a little more clarification on it.
Lay it on me.
So it was an article saying that UW-Madison student government voted unanimously to remove the Lincoln statue. And you retweeted that and quoted, "Megalomaniacs. Student governments should only have enough power to host bake sales. In all other regards, they should be ignored." I'm a political science major. I'm very interested in student government. I'm president of College Democrats on campus. I just want to know a little bit more about your thought process behind that post.
So my experience with campus government is that it's everyone who ever wants to be a politician ends up there. And I don't like politicians. So the jump from campus, president campus, to becoming a staffer on some state senator's staff, to then making it to DC and becoming a staff creature. It's something I've seen often. And I've never seen a campus council do anything that was beneficial to the students. It's just kind of a repository for the power hungry, which seems contradictory to my sort of localism statement, but I do think these councils form a function in that they give people who are going to be future busybodies something to do. So it's kind of a relief valve for the rest of the university. And that's its primary function, which sounds harsh, but I've seen way too many power grabs out of the council, especially, at Lawrence. It was just every day. I'm like, what are you people doing now? Who gave you this power? Especially when they start bullying the president and doing these sit-ins and organizing things that are just outside the purview of representing the student body as a whole. Too often, It's what the people on the council want to do. Screw everybody else. And I'm just tired of it. So that's where I was coming from. I stand by it.
We have an online question in a similar vein, I believe, so I'll read it. Do you think campus leadership should stay politically neutral to avoid the perception of a power dynamic, which is often why there's a culture of silence from the right? I work for the Medical College of Wisconsin, and we are struggling as a whole to combat the feeling of forced progressive ideologies due to the very public views of leadership.
Could I get that, just the starting bit there?
Yeah, do you think campus leadership should stay politically neutral to avoid the perception of a power dynamic?
Campus leadership is in the administration.
I believe so.
I mean, that's the ideal. The purpose of the administration is to further the university, and getting caught up in partisanship rarely works to the university's favor. Now, our university is sort of on welfare in the form of these loans that are just thrown at young students, and they've never really had to compete in an open marketplace. Yes, one could certainly say that, but will administrators do that? I think there's, as I was saying, the 5–10% of the student body and the faculty are by far the loudest and lodge the most complaints. So for the administration, they're hearing a whole lot of hullabaloo about political stuff. They're like, oh, should we be doing this? Can we be doing this? I suppose. And so they kind of back into it. More often than not. I mean, there are some exceptions, especially at some prestigious schools, where the presidents just go out there and say really foolish things. It's difficult to say without knowing more about a particular situation. But yes, I think administrators, CEOs should look more after the health of their institution and less at sort of points that can be scored in the short term along partisan lines on the left and right in some cases.
Great. Let's do one more question and then we'll have time to network because I know it's very warm in this room. I don't want to roast everyone out.
Luther, you have a fine first name, but I didn't hear you suggest or mention religion on a campus where conservative could turn to perhaps find some solace or not feel as alone. Perhaps you could speak to that.
Yes, thank you. You got me on that one. I mean, go to church, be part of religious organizations as befits your faith. Me, Christian guy, go to church. Not only is it sort of spiritual relief, but it's also there that you'll meet people older than yourself, people interested in helping you through college, especially if you're feeling alone. As I was saying, join groups, join institutions. A church, Sunday's kind of a down day on a campus calendar. Get out and meet people. It can be scary at times, especially in a town you don't know. But I promise within a few weeks, if you stay after it, you will have friends outside of it, and the people at church will know young people like you. And you can do really well for yourself there. I mean, really by every metric. So thank you. Thank you for that suggestion.
All right, let's give Luther another big round of applause. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Mike Leader. I run the Center for Civic and Community Engagement here on campus, and we're really, really grateful that Luther could come and share his story with us and his journey. And he's graciously agreed to hang out with our at our networking reception, so you can continue to ask him questions there. And before you all leave for the networking reception, we have lots of guests who are also eager to talk with you and share their experiences with you, just as Luther did earlier today. Do we have any elected officials here? We had some register, but I think they're all in session, unfortunately. I don't think we have any elected ones, unfortunately. Some wanted to come, but they do have their duties to do, so that's important. But we are joined by members of the Student Veterans Association. So if you're a member of SVA, can you stand up so people know who you are and they can chat with you? A number of student veterans here. Thanks for being here, and other veterans. Thank you. And the members of the College Republicans stand. SVA, you can sit down. We have some College Republicans here tonight, so if you want to talk to them, learn about their club, you can chat with them. Thank you. We have members of the College Democrats. Can you all stand up as well? Great, a handful here. Thank you for being here as well. I'd also like Brooke and Devin to stand up. They are our campus Bridging the Divide students. So they're running a great event on campus called Bridging the Divide, sponsored by our friends at the Thompson Center. You should learn about that event. If you're interested in just having great conversations, even about political issues, this is an event for you. So check it out. Talk to these two. They'll tell you more about it. I know that we have guests from League of Women Voters. Would some of you ladies stand up in case people want to chat with at least a wave? Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. So lots of people who are willing to connect with you and talk with you, and it's rare that you have such an opportunity to talk to so many people. So please take advantage of that. If you haven't done a lot of networking before for our students, let me give you a couple quick pointers. If you're talking to student orgs, ask them about their mission. Ask them what they do for programs and speakers and why you should consider joining them. I was going to talk about elected officials, but we don't have any of them there. But the League of Women Voters is doing really great nonpartisan work in this community, so definitely talk with those women as well. And then one last note before you go, if you are a guest here tonight, so non-students, students, we have your email addresses. For all of you non-students, thank you for coming. That's great. If you would like to learn about more events like this on campus that you can come to, or get the information from the Thompson Center, sign up with your name and email at the laptop at the back table, and we'll add you to the list so you can get invited to all the online Thompson Center events as well, and things happening here on our campus. So again, thank you for sitting in a very warm room tonight, but please join us to network, grab some food and drink before you go. Thank you for coming.